Good afternoon and welcome to this Introduction to Lean Construction Lunch and Learn. Today, this Lunch and Learn will aim to give you an awareness of the key Lean tools and techniques and explain how Lean can benefit the construction industry. This Lunch and Learn will also introduce to the Introduction to Lean Construction Learning pathway, of which this is one of 8 pathways that the Supply Chain Sustainability School will be launching this year that we'd like you to get involved with throughout the course of this year. My name is Brett Blake and I'm working with an organisation called LC International that is in partnership with the Supply Chain Sustainability School. So thank you very much for joining this session today. Now this session is using a Miro board, and within this Miro board we have the opportunity for you to have a go at adding some thoughts and comments. And to do this you can use the drop down menu towards the left hand side. So for those of you that actually have access to the Miro board, and I've also put a link to the Miro board in the Zoom chat that you can use, please feel free to access that. Now, towards the middle and end of this session, there's going to be an opportunity for you to feed some thoughts and comments into this Miro board. And it's easily done. All you need to do is identify a post-it note on the left-hand side with your mouse, choose a colour you would like to use, and then add it somewhere you would like to see it on the Miro board. Once you've added it to the Miro board, you can type a comment in there. And these comments can then be understood and shared with everybody else on the call today. So please feel free to have a go for the next minute or so of just adding a comment, a post-it note into this area that I'm just displaying now on the Miro board. Excellent, so we've got some guests just adding some thoughts in there. And again, towards the middle and the end, we've got an opportunity to use these interactive features to add some thoughts around the frustrations you have currently that you're facing at work, but also for questions and answers that we'll look at the very end. Those of you that don't have access to the Miro board and you'd like to add comments, please feel free to do this using the Zoom chat, and I'm more than happy to copy and paste them across for you. Okay, so thank you very much for adding some thoughts in there. So let's look at the agenda that we've got today. So what we're going to be looking at in our agenda today is a welcome introductions. We're then going to look at the introduction to the learning pathway, and I'm going to take you through how we seek out frustrations and opportunities. We'll then look to understand your current frustrations you have, and we can use these as examples in how we take action through the Lean enablers. And then finally, we'll close off with the questions and answers. So let's now look at the learning pathway itself. So the learning pathway has been developed between ourselves and the Supply Chain Sustainability School. And what we're looking to do is, through the course of 2021 and the early part of 2022, is create 4 elements for the Introduction to Lean pathway and 5 elements for all of the other pathways. So these all are started through a lunch and learn. This is your introduction to the learning pathway. And today we'll be looking at the Introduction to Lean Construction. Following this pathway, if you choose to continue, we're opening up to a closed workshop of up to 15 to 20 people, where we'll start to share the e-learning modules, which will give you a base knowledge of the Lean module that we go through. This will be then followed up by a workshop. And this workshop will be a 3-hour workshop, which will take you through the fundamentals of the Lean thinking, and also give you the opportunity to practice from the preparation you have made prior to the workshop, which we will share with you. So the learning pathway and the way we're working this through the course of the year is to take you on a learning journey from overview of what Lean thinking is, into some base knowledge that you can gather through the e-learning, and then finally entering into a workshop where we can work together collaboratively with like-minded people to say, how do we explore that Lean tool and technique, and how do we make it work within our own chosen workspaces? For those of you that are interested in taking this pathway further, the target audience is really quite open. It's open to anybody within lean construction or the built environment, or the supply chains that support those areas, that has an interest in making a difference. Aiming to look at how do we make tomorrow a better day? And that's based on identifying issues, dealing with those issues, and taking action. So what are the subjects that we look at within the learning pathways? So the one we're looking at today is the Introduction to Lean, and this is going to give you an overview and an outline of what lean thinking is and where it came from. Two further lean modules are focused on lean construction and waste, and then number 8, value stream mapping. And these techniques are an excellent opportunity for you to explore what's currently happening in your own work areas, to give you an understanding of where you can make the improvements. The other lean modules that we have, which are problem solving and continuous improvement, visual management, collaborative planning and production control, 5S workplace organisation, and finally standardised working. These are what we call enablers, and these are enablers for change. So once we understand our current situation and the frustrations that we're facing, those enablers give us the techniques that we can use to enact an improvement. So what I'd like to do first of all is take you through those 3 modules that look at exploring where we currently are. So how do we seek out frustrations and opportunities? Well, the best method is to do something we call go, look and see. And it's as simple as it says. Go out to your workplaces, whether it be on site or whether it be on some of the supporting functions. You may be a project manager or construction manager. So your go, look, see will be physically on the construction or building site, seeing how your people are working, asking them what's working well, what's not working well, and what's causing them frustration and taking them away from what they believe is what they should be doing. Once we understand those frustrations, we can then start to think about those enablers to take action. If you're working in a support function like HR or finance, payroll, health and safety, for example, you can still do your go, look, see. You can start to understand how inductions are working. Are people getting the upfront development required for them to do their jobs? We can look to make sure that invoices are paid on time. We can look to see what the frustrations are that are being caused by our supply chain or the frustrations that we're causing our customers. And these things we can look at in more depth to say, well, what action can we take to improve this? Now, go, look, see, for those that have never come across this before, if any of you have seen TV series like Nightmares or Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares or Undercover Boss, the very nature of these television series are all about getting the experts, the people that know the processes, closer to see them day by day and actually identify where problems occur. But also by the very nature of going onto site, they're working with the very people that see these problems day by day, but don't necessarily know what action to take to improve or who to go to. So our Go, Look, See is all about getting to see the issues that we see, talking to people and understanding what frustrations they have, but then working with them through those enablers to say, well, we can make a difference. So when you do go out and conduct your Go, Look, See, think about putting some time in your diary to do this and scheduling it and having a good walk around and thinking about what is it that I need to look for. And this can be done by using what we call the 8 wastes. Now, the 8 wastes is a lean technique that starts to help us understand where things can and do go wrong. Now, within those 8 wastes, we have transportation. Transportation is the movement of our materials on and off site, the movement of our waste on and off site, the transportation of equipment we might use to do the task. We've got to think about how are we managing that transportation around our site and what issues are faced by not having the right materials and equipment on site at the right time. If you're working in a busy city centre, for example, how are we managing the transportation in and around the normal transport of that city so that we do get our materials and equipment where we need them and when we need them? The next thing to look for within our waste is our inventory. The materials we will use for the construction or building. Or if we're in a back office function, the inventory could just be the information required to perform a task. How are we managing that inventory? Do we have the right things in the right place at the right time? Are they stored correctly? Or do they get damaged, causing defects? So we've got to think about, as we do our go, look, see, where are we seeing some of these wastes? Now, lean thinking is all about waste removal. It isn't about time and motion, about making people work quicker. It's about removing things that shouldn't be causing a problem. And that's our main focus on lean. It's let's remove what we shouldn't be doing, rather than just focus on improving what we should be doing. By the very nature of removing waste, we will have a bigger impact on the time we have available to do the things that are the value-added activities, the things that our customers are expecting, like a finished construction, building, or activity. Now, going back to some of these other wastes, we have movement. This is your movement when you're working. Do you have everything you need to hand, or have you got to go searching for what you need? Think about if you're working from a desktop. Whereabouts are your apps on your computer screen? Whereabouts you keep your files or information you require? And if you've got to search more than 1 or 2 mouse clicks to get your information, there's some work we can do to improve that movement. Waiting. Waiting is a waste where if you're waiting to do something and the information isn't there for you to take action, or the materials or equipment aren't there or serviceable to use, you have to wait to be able to perform your task. So think about what waiting you have and what you need to do to work with your supply chain, other people in the process, to make sure you have everything you need when you need it. Ensuring that that plan is understood and worked on by all. Another waste is overproduction. Now, overproduction is what we call our deadliest waste. Because if you're producing more of one thing, the chances are you're producing less of the things that you need. Overproduction can cause greater inventory, which can create more transportation and movement. It probably creates more defects, because if you've got greater inventory that's not being used, it's a fear of getting damaged. Overproduction can cause overprocessing, because if you've got too much on hand, the chances are you're booking in and out of systems and moving it around the site more. So think about these wastes. And then the final one there is defects. How do we ensure that what we do, we get right every time, whether it be a physical construction activity or information that we supply to the teams that we work with? Are we supplying the right information at the right time that they can take action on? And if not, the chances are we're creating a defect, which means we have to have rework to do that job again, which is costing time, effort, and money. The final one we have on there is the plus S. So we've got to ensure that we have our people with the right skills, capabilities, and opportunity to perform the right things at the right time. So this is one excellent tool that we can use for our go, look and see to identify where wastes are hidden in everything that we do. And I'm sure once you start using this go, look and see at work, you'll try and do this at home as well. I'm forever at the fear of my wife and children doing my 7 waste walk around the house and identifying where things are not quite right. And it becomes a, how would I say, a way of working, a way of life. Everything that you need to do is all about removing of those wastes and becoming more efficient. So you only have to do things once. To give a little bit more detail to help you with your go, look, see, I've given a brief description of those wastes there. And after this session, we will share a copy of this canvas to you all, but also We will send a PDF of this that you can print off and use as part of your Go Look See, so that you're really uncovering what those wastes look like. Those of you that join our learning pathway for the Introduction to Lean will get the opportunity to take on board the e-learning that is hosted by the Supply Chain Sustainability School. And that will give you a little bit more of an understanding of what these wastes are and how to look out for them, which will feed into the workshops we will run. The other analysis type of tool that we use within Lean is something called value stream mapping. Now, value stream mapping is the art of getting people together and starting to depict, in the traditional sense, post-it notes on a bit of brown paper, what that process looks like. So what do I do? What do I pass on to other people? And what do they receive from me? And how do we work together to ensure what we've committed to do in our plan is actually happening? And as we can see from these examples in front, we've got a number of people working in the construction and building trade, identifying what their process looks like, and the pink post-it notes are actually identifying all of their frustrations to being able to get the job done as they would expect to do that. We can see on the bottom right examples that there's some metrics and some charts, pie charts and bar graphs that start to identify where things are working well and where we need to focus our intention to improve. And this is all born out of our Go, Look and See to deeply understand and also identify where those wastes are hidden within our process. So that's a brief snapshot of those three techniques we can use to go out to deeply understand our process. It's about Go, Look and See to deeply understand. Talk to your people, understand what frustrates them within their processes. Use the 8 wastes to identify where things are hidden that's taking us away from what is important for the work to be done to complete that project on time and in full. And then finally, the value stream mapping. The value stream mapping is the art of capturing things in one place so we can share that across the supply chain and get them involved in where their frustrations are and what actions they need to take to make their process more efficient through the end-to-end of that project. So what I'd like to do now is just spend a few minutes now handing over to yourself and giving you the opportunity to use this facility on Miro to add your post-it notes. And again, we do this by clicking a post-it note, selecting a colour and adding it to the place on the Miro board. Once it's in there, you can type your comment. So I'm going to put my frustration here as silence. I need comments from you guys so that we can take this forward into our next part of the session. So please feel free to use this Miro board functionality to add your thoughts of where your current frustrations are that you face on site, that you would like to overcome as we enter through the next part of this session, which is talking about the enablers and the actions we can take. The frustrations you share on here today, we can share with everybody else on the call, and that might just provoke a reaction with them as well. Those of you that don't have access to the Miro board, please feel free to type your frustrations into the Zoom chat, and I'll more than happy copy and paste them across into this section of frustrations on our board. To type into your board as you select your post-it note, if you double click the post-it note or shape you add in there, it will add the text for you. So I'm going to copy this one across now. So lack of ambition. Thank you very much, Caroline. We've also got struggle to get people involved. Thank you very much, Lisa. Oh, we've got lots of comments on there. Any of the comments that I do miss off of this, I will add on at a later date, so I do apologise now. So we've got lack of willingness of people to change the process. We've got not thinking ahead, only looking at the immediate. Thank you for that one. Slow response from line managers. That's a really good comment. And sometimes the slow response will come from the fact that they don't really know what lean is. So our challenge when we start to think about lean is look at engaging all people in this process, giving all people an understanding of what lean thinking is, so they understand what support they need to give to the teams. So I will add the other comments from this a little bit later. Okay, so please feel free to keep adding them on there, and I do apologise for not adding them straight away. So I'm just going to add them as text at the side here so I don't lose them. Perfect. Okay, so let's just have a review of some of these comments that we have on there. So we have lack of communication across the company. It's really key that as you enter into your lean way of working, or whatever method you use, that communication is understood from the very top to the bottom, but also from the bottom to the top of your organizational structure. Everybody needs to understand what they're responsible for and who they're responsible to, and ensure that there's no ambiguity of who's going to be taking what action when we start to think about lean. Lack of time to prepare documents. Absolutely. As you start to enter into your lean way of working, ultimately you will save time and become more efficient. But there has to be an investment in how do you create that standard work so we all have one way of working, the most efficient way of working. Lack of communication between supervisors and operatives. So use that go, look and see to actually spend more time together. Think about your supervisors and your team leaders and managers. How much of their day is spent with people and how much of their day is firefighting problems that have gone wrong again and again. And think about how we use lean thinking, and we'll look at these enablers shortly, to change that thought process between reactive to proactive ways of working. Lack of incentives, regulations for zero and minimal waste. So think about how it is that people work. Think about what's in it for the individuals. What do they want to get from this? And sometimes the message that the business wants isn't necessarily the message that people understand. So think about how that works. Responsibility is a key one. So how do we get people to take responsibility? Now, from my experience, I find responsibility is also a link to control and trust. So how much control does the business have, and how much trust does the business give? And responsibility will come when we start to understand the control we have within an organisation and the trust we have within an organisation. So think about looking at those areas as well. Let's just move across to the other side of the board. People not taking the time to apply lean principles. And again, we'll think about how do we break these lean principles and this lean thinking down into smaller scale opportunities. I always talk to people and say, what is your 1%, your smallest bit that you're going to work on today to make tomorrow better? And all of these 1%s coming together will actually enact a greater change. We'll just take a couple more before I move on to the enablers. Yes, lowest cost, which is not best in longer term. So within lean thinking, we don't necessarily think about cost. We think about more efficient and effective ways of working. And sometimes that might be at a greater cost. But actually, it gives us the opportunity to get it right first time. So our focus is about removal of waste. And by the very nature of removal of waste, we're giving ourselves more time to do the things that are more important. Ultimately, that will reduce the costs. So thank you very much for adding your thoughts and comments on there. And I will add all of the other comments that we have also onto this after this session, so that you've at least got them as a reference point at the end of this session. So I'm just going to add them in there now. Okay, so moving on to our next session and part of the session. We're going to now start looking at those lean enablers. And those lean enablers are broken down into 5 elements. We have 5S, workplace organisation. We have collaborative planning and production control. We have problem solving and continuous improvement, standardized work, and visual management. And these lean enablers are our opportunity to, in a structured way, to take action on the wastes and the opportunities we've just been talking about. However, we've got to be very mindful that we don't want to become what we call tool heads. So please don't fall into the trap of becoming proficient at one of these tools and thinking that that one tool will fix all. The analogy I have around this is around if you have a toolbox in your garage and your toolbox has a saw in it and you like using the saw, you wouldn't use that saw for every activity that you have. You choose the right tool for the right situation. And as we start to look at these enablers, I'd like you to think about these enablers, the things you've identified as your wastes, and then which technique may give you the greatest improvement or opportunity to work with other people to get them to understand the actions they can take. So the first one we're going to look at is 5S and workplace organisation. Oops, I do apologise, I've moved to the start again. So 5S and workplace organisation. So this is our opportunity to think about what is the order we need to have to ensure we're proactive and organised all we do. Think about the tasks that you undertake, whether you be a dry liner, whether you be an electrician, or whether you are in a support function and dealing with payroll, for example. Think about what you need to have sorted in such a way that you can perform your activities without having to seek out where information is, without having to seek out which tool is the right tool for the job. Think about how you do that and organise that. In the example we have there around the before and after, it's just a very simple, what we call toolbox or shadow board of our equipment that we will use. And in the first example, it's showing tools here, there and everywhere, higgledy-piggledy. Very difficult to find the tool we need to do the job. Think about your desktops, for example. Do you have icons everywhere, or can you go to the right application or app straight away? If you can't find what you need immediately, think about how you need to organise your desktop or your working surroundings. And we do this by sorting out the things that we don't need anymore. And then we then set in order the things that we do need, making sure that they are to hand in an order that's understood. Now, this becomes a challenge when you're working with a team or a group of people, because that setting in order has to be agreed by all, because one person's order might be different to the logic of another person's order. And the example I always give here is around how you load a dishwasher. So when I look at my dishwasher at home, I load that in the best way possible. However, everybody else in my household doesn't know how to load a dishwasher. They put the things in their own order. However, if I wanted to improve that, the thing I would do is I'd have to put, say, a photo on the front of the dishwasher so they can see what the best order is. But that still isn't going to work, because I've got to get into the imagination of that team to understand Does their order and their preference work in the same way as mine? So it's great when you set an order with 5S to work as a team to agree that order that then everybody can work to. The third S is about shine. And shine isn't just cleaning. Shining is about making sure that that order is working for you, that you've still got the tools, equipment, information to hand in the right place when you need it. And this is your opportunity to then start maybe creating a checklist to say, if this is what we've agreed to do, are we working to that agreed way of working? And if we are, great. Let's standardize that in step 4. But if things are still going wrong, that's our challenge to then re-look at that order to say, what do we need to do differently? How do we work with our supply chain partners, the people, our colleagues, to ensure that what we agree to do is the right way is understood by all? And then the final S, step 5, sustain, is all about making sure what we have in place sticks. And as you can see, this is an ongoing cycle. And this is where there's always room for improvement. It's an ongoing journey. The journey never ends, because when you get to where you think the destination is, there are other improvements you can make. So the 5S approach is an iterative approach, where that you're always looking for opportunities to improve the way you use your systems, the way you lay out your sites, the way that you ensure people understand the actions that they need to take to become as efficient as they can be. Now we are missing one S on there, and that's what we call a 6th S, and that's safety. And we've got to ensure through 5S that whatever we put in place is understood and it creates a more safe condition to the one that we've just moved away from. So that's a little bit about 5S. So, collaborative planning. So collaborative planning is our method of working together across our supply chain. It's about taking that master schedule plan and breaking it down into smaller buckets of activity. This is where we can start to create commitments across our team to understand, what do we plan to do, what's actually happening, and have we made the commitments to ensure that that project is moving at the right rate that we expect. Our opportunity with collaborative planning is all about ensuring that the timelines that we agreed to are actually kept. Now, collaborative planning works from that overriding master schedule. However, that master schedule might not be in the right order. It might not have understood all of the elements to make that project work well. So the collaborative planning is all about getting the key people together that will be performing those tasks and their supervisor team to say, okay then, this is what we expect to do in the next 6 to 12 weeks. How do we now work together to make that happen? And what commitments are we going to make as a team to ensure that it happens as planned? Our collaborative plan also gives us the opportunity to sit down with each other to understand, what are our make-ready needs? What are we planning in advance to ensure that we have the right resource, the right materials, the right utilisation of our cranes and hoists on site and some of the key equipment to ensure that we don't double book equipment, or somebody's using equipment on one part of the site when it's required for somewhere else. We can use a collaborative planning to manage our deliveries to site to ensure that we don't create a bottleneck at our entrance or exit for information on materials coming in or for the waste materials that we're taking away. Collaborative planning is one of these activities that we talk about, but we very rarely sit down with a group of people to say exactly how are we going to work together to deliver this. And then afterwards, check to make sure that what we agreed has actually happened. So the collaborative planning is an excellent tool to break down the overriding program into smaller sections that we can then take action on. There has to be then the follow-up on a weekly and daily basis that allows the teams that interaction and engagement, and start to share some of the challenges they face that we may need to overcome that could have been overlooked in that overriding collaborative plan. Now, when you first enter into the collaborative plan, there could be some resistance from the teams that you work with, because this is a new way of working. It's asking people to share exactly the steps that they will take and then make commitments. Now, these commitments shouldn't be used as a finger-pointing exercise to apportion blame when things go wrong. These commitments should be identified of, if things do go wrong, how can we work together to overcome that, to remove that problem in future phases of the project or other projects that we're working on. So it's a great opportunity for the collaborative plan to identify opportunities to work together more efficiently in the future. And in the photographs that we have on here as an example, we can see the trades themselves adding their information linked to the overriding master schedule of the commitments they will work toward to ensure that the project and the part of their project is delivered on time and in full. The little graphic that I'm zooming into now is just a bit of a collaborative planning metric board that starts to link in the overriding plan, which we will add the information to within the grid, where it would link to a schematic on site so we can start to identify maybe exclusion zones or hotspots on the sites where groups of people will be working together. It gives us an opportunity to judge and gauge whether, from a commitment perspective, do we have confidence that this plan will be met or not? So towards the left, we've got little confidence, so we need to take action. Towards the right, we've got ultimate confidence, so actually we're happy to move on to week 2 to say, how are we now starting to plan towards week 2? Now, traditionally, this would have been managed around a control room and post-its on a wall. However, we have the opportunity to use technology like the Miro board I have today and use this as our collaborative plan, so it can be accessed at all times by all people using various media types, mobile phone, tablet or computer. So that's a little bit about collaborative planning. The next construction, or the next lean construction technique, is what we call problem solving and continuous improvement. And this is where we start to think about the issues that we face with the plan that we've set. Not all plans will go according to plan, and we can use problem solving across our supply chain and the people we work with to say, okay then, what was the problem that we faced? Why didn't what we planned to happen actually happen? And we can go through this 6-step approach to say, what were the potential causes of why we're seeing the things that we hadn't planned? We can identify from those causes what the potential options are to improve, which will feed into the solutions that we can take as a team. Then we go into the final 2 phases of implementation and result. And these are really key to ensure that we implement a solution that is solving the problem that we have, and we have an understanding of the result we want to achieve. So it's really key when we enter into a problem solving activity that we understand the problem that we face, but also we agree as a team what we see as the desired situation, where we would see excellence being and where we would like to be together as a team. And we ensure that we work through these 6 steps and challenge ourselves to ensure that the solution that we implement delivers the results we were expecting. Now, one of the key tools within problem solving is about challenging ourselves. And it's about challenging ourselves with that question of why. So why are we seeing the problems that we see? Why is it happening at this time? Where are the problems occurring? Is it on site or off site? What is the actual issue? How do we be specific in identifying what the actual problem is? How big is the problem? What's the scale of it? Is it affecting quality? Is it affecting safety or delivery? When is it occurring? Is it early in the morning? Is it late at night? Is it towards the beginning of the month or the end of the month? Does it happen only when we have poor weather, for example? And by asking these open and leading questions, we can then really start to identify what are the potential causes of that problem, so that we deal with the root cause and not just the symptoms we see. So our challenge with problem solving is not to just put a quick fix or a countermeasure in just to hide or mask the problem we have, but it's really to start to dig deep and challenge what are the true causes of those issues. And problem solving is a really good technique to get people working together to solve the problem once and for all, that can be then learnt across different teams and different projects. Another technique is standard work. Now, whenever you go into any change at work, consider standardized work, because as you start to make improvements, the chances are your standards that you have in place will also need to be improved. Now, standard work is all about ensuring that we have things that are repeatable, things that are able to be done again and again, that they're reliable, so it's able to be trusted, and it will give that consistently good quality or performance. And then finally, it's capable, so it's able to achieve efficiently whatever has to be done, and also everybody within the team that has that task to complete can complete it in the same reliable way, and they have the capabilities, the knowledge and experience to be able to do that also. So what are the 4 steps to standardized work? Well, the first thing we need to consider is the process, the critical process that we're working with. And that can be any process. Again, it could be the induction process you have for new starters on site. Do we have a standard way that we take them through that induction to ensure they're ready to perform their tasks in a safe way on site? It could be a standard around how we want materials delivered to site to ensure that our entrance to site isn't blocked, and that the way materials are delivered, how they are required at point of use, and maintaining and ensuring that we keep the quality of that product so that it can be used and we're able to deliver what we need to deliver with that right first time. Once we identify that critical process, it's about documenting that standard. Now, a traditional way of doing that is in the written word on a document. However, nowadays, there's many technologies out there we can use to start documenting that standard work. We can use YouTube videos. We can use something called Vimeo. There's also platforms out there like Augmentate that look at a digital application to standard work that can be accessed at any time via any tablet or mobile phone. So think about, as you start to document your standard, how it will look and how people will react to that to ensure the tasks that they're completing are done right first time, every time. For standard work to work, we've got to ensure that we do have those management routines to constantly check, do we have the right standards in place? Are they being adhered to? Do people understand what standards are and why they're important to the quality of the products and the constructions and the sites that we're working on? And then finally, like all the lean cycles, the final cycle is about taking the action to further improve. So as people become proficient at those standards, they may find better ways of working. There may be new technologies or tools out there that we can use, which we need to build into that standard work for the future. Standard work can also be used as a training aid in your inductions and bringing new people to site. That actually sets the standard around, this is how we work as an organisation. And if you work like this with us as an organisation, we will be a performing organisation and we will be successful in everything that we do. Now, standardised work works very closely in hand with problem solving. So if you have a problem and you identify there's an issue on site, the first thing I would do is check, are people working to the standard? And if they are, that's good. But if they're not, I'd be starting to challenge thinking around, what do we need to do to get back to that standard that we've all agreed is the right way of working? If the standard was failing and it wasn't quite right, my challenge would be, in my problem solving, is to improve that standard, to ensure that everybody's then on the same page of this is how we do things within this business. And the final one of the enablers is what we call visual management. Now, visual management has a couple of elements, and I'm just going to zoom in onto the elements around the left-hand side to start off with. So visual management needs to have three elements, and we call this our acid test. So with any visual management or any visuals we use on site, whether they be printed out documents or posters, or whether they be our control rooms or package boards that are driving our plan forward within teams, we need to be able to understand that situation at a glance. So can your teams understand what that visual management and that information is telling them? If they can, excellent. If they can't, we may need to revisit what does that visual management look like, because our challenge with visual management is to expose those opportunities, those things where we can enter into our continuous improvement cycle so we continually improve the situation we're in. Visual management works very closely hand in hand with a cycle called plan, do, check, act. So what plan do we have? How are we delivering that plan? And then how are we checking and exposing those opportunities from what we know to take action? So the third element within our acid test is how do we work with our people to inspire improvement? So how do we ensure our visuals tell a story that we can understand very quickly? How does it provoke that reaction where we can start to expose the frustrations and opportunities that we face so we can actually take action to improve? And that forms part of that plan, do, check, act cycle, that taking action, the inspiring improvement within our people. The second element of visual management focuses on how it works for us. So as we state there, the goal of visual management is to provoke the desired reaction. Because if the goal doesn't provoke the desired reaction, and we don't allow it to provoke a thought in our own minds of what it wants us to do, that information, that visual management, it just becomes wallpaper. We just walk past it day by day. And I've seen this happen where people will just walk past and go, that looks nice, but take no action. So we've got to ensure that our visual management is up to date, it's relevant, and it provokes that desired reaction for our teams to take action from, for the good of themselves, the business, and all the projects they're working with. Within visual management, think about what you use. Do you use text that could be understood by people that actually can read the language that the text is written in? Or do we use visuals that can be understood by multilingual people, that can be understood by different cultures and different people that work within our organisation? I know which out of those two examples I would move toward, and it would be the visual, because it's telling me don't go there because there's going to be a disaster. Whereas by the time I've understood that with the written word, it's probably going to be too late. And then finally with visual management, how do we bring it to life on the site? So how do we link what it is that we're trying to tell as a story so that we can see that difference, that contrast between the normal and abnormal? So how do we make our sites, whether they be on the construction site or the build site, or even in the offices that we work within on our support functions, how do we make our areas talk to us and actually identify to us immediately when things aren't going to plan or things are happening that are out of the ordinary? So that's a little bit about those 5 enablers. And these are the things that we're going to be looking at in the pathway around the introduction to lean. And then the other modules that we will look at within other learning pathways will go into more detail around the construction and waste, problem solving, visual management, collaborative planning, 5S, standardized work and value stream mapping. And information around the other learning pathways that we'll be delivering throughout the course of the year can be found on the Supply Chain Sustainability School portal. And you have an option to start the journey through the Lunch and Learn, and then enter into those closed workshops that you can be part of to really start to challenge the thinking about lean and how you can drive that difference and make that difference within your own sites. So what I'd like to do now is come to the questions and answers at the end. And I'd like you to have this opportunity to start to think about what it is that you've taken from this session. And please feel free to pose your question there. I will look to answer as many as I can in the session we have at this moment in time. And any that I don't answer in this session, I will post an answer after this session that we will share with you via the links and the PDFs that we'll send at the end. So I'll just give you a few minutes, and please feel free again to select a post-it note and add it into the section and just type a question that you'd like answering. Okay, do we have any questions from anybody? While we're waiting for some questions to come on there, please feel free to refer to the link towards the side of the questions and answers on the Miro board, and this will take you to the feedback form for this session. My colleague from the Supply Chain Sustainability School has also added the feedback form to the chat, and I believe we'll also send this out as a reminder in an email at the end of this session. Please feel free to give feedback on this session of how you felt about how it's been put across, because that will help other people when they join this session in the future to get more from these sessions that we put on. So I'll just spend a couple more minutes looking at some of these questions that we're adding on here. So I'm just going to copy some of the questions that we have there. So we've just got a question here around how do you encourage people to work on lean when busy with other things? So the way I encourage people is I just sit down with them first of all, and I don't talk about lean. I say, okay, then how are things going? Is it a good day or a bad day? And more often than not, we'll say, oh, it's been quite challenging. There's been a few frustrations. So I then start to explore those frustrations. And then I ask the question around, what are they doing to try and remove those frustrations? And if they're not doing anything, then I may then start to talk about, maybe coach with them around, well, what could they do? Who could they involve? What actions could they take? And that's how I usually encourage people to start to take action. Because if they take action when they're busy with other things, the chances are the things that are causing frustration will then give them that free time in the future. We've got another question here. Would you apply 5S to any project size? That's a good question. And I would say I'm going to give what I call a non-answer. And the non-answer is it depends. I would apply 5S dependent on what it is you're trying to achieve. So please don't fall into the trap with these lean tools to just apply the tool. Don't just think that you've now got a screwdriver, a hammer, and a saw, that those are the tools that you're going to use. Think about the situation that you're facing and then apply the right tool or technique to help improve that situation. So when you apply 5S to any project, yes, you can apply it to any size project, but you've got to ensure that everybody on the page within that project understand what you're trying to achieve. So I would always say start small in a small area and then use that as an exemplar area for the rest of the project. It would be easier to manage, and then you can start to draw learning from that with other people. We've got a question there, how to select people to implement lean improvements, how to form a lean multidisciplinary team, what to consider. So the first thing I'd always consider there is I would ask for volunteers. I'd probably share some sort of introduction to lean so people understand, well, what's this terminology, what's it all about, what does it mean to my business, and then say, is anybody interested in that, actually looking into this in a bit more detail. And if you have too many people interested, then I'd probably start to share with them that there's too many of you at the first start. We like to start this small, so we're going to do a bit of a selection, and we'll just have maybe a couple of fun activities that just gets people to think about how they would deal with situations in different contexts. And from that, you'll start to identify with 3 or 4 people that you think, these are the leaders I want to take forward in the first instance. But then the other people that volunteered, they can then also be part of it as your foot soldiers, so to speak, the people that are your eyes and ears on the ground that are doing the do, led by the ones that have been identified as the drivers of change. So that's a good way of looking at it across multidisciplines and multi-teams. Good question there. Where does BIM fit in? Well, BIM can fit into all of that within Lean. So one thing with BIM, you need to make sure it's set up in such a way using standardized work so that you have the same approach as setting up a BIM within all of the different model projects that you have. You've got to ensure that the visuals that you're creating within BIM align nicely with the collaborative planning so people can see the actions are taken, how it links back to the BIM that you have there. So when I say where does it fit in with BIM, it fits in all the way through BIM, because BIM in itself is a system, and if you don't actually start to think about what you're doing to get the best out of that system, it becomes then a chore. So you've got to think about using lean thinking around how do I get the best out of BIM, but not just BIM, any of the systems that you use within your business. Okay then, so let's have a look. Another question. Are there any particular real-life examples where these approaches have resulted in very significant or radical changes? Absolutely. So I'm working with a data center partner at this moment in time, and they've used standardized work and they've used collaborative planning, and in one data center alone, they've returned a improvement of over €1 million for one data center. And that's on one small area of the data center they're working in. And all they did there was they focused on the standards that their supply chain partners were working with, and then how they were getting them to work together collaboratively to ensure that those changes were worked together across that team. And that's just one small example. Within 5S, I've worked within 5S within a purchase order process where a team was delivering 25,000 or working with 25,000 purchase orders a day. And we used the 5S to ensure that we organise the systems and also the physical scanning activities in such a way that they could process more of the time. And we were ensuring that people knew the parts they played in that team. And we actually got an uplift of that team of about 25%. More work was completed without actually having to do any more work, because they'd removed some of the wasteful activities that were hidden within the organisation of that process. So these are just very simple results. However, if you want more results, please feel free after this session to make contact. And as we draw to the end of this 1 hour lunch and learn, I'm just sharing now our contact details of LC International. So my name's been Brett Blake, and I work with LC International in partnership with Supply Chain Sustainability School. And if you need any other support or want to ask any further questions around how you can make this live within your own work areas, please feel free to make contact. And before you leave today, please rest assured that everything that you've added onto this board today will be written up in such a way that we can then share this with you and you can take action on this in the future. So thank you very much for your time today, and have a great afternoon.